We are once again looking at the old town, pre-railroad Greensburg, before the railroad came through in 1852. We had seen old Dutchtown, which was over this way. Dutchtown was over here, but now we're looking at Main Street, which runs up here and points east. This map was made for us by, the basis of it was made for us by J.B. Alexander in 1820, and I added a few things up here, things on the outliers. I put this together to show where things were being made in the old town. We'll first of all see a few things on Main Street and then head down to this part of Pittsburgh Street and look at some stuff. This was J.B. Alexander, the guy who made that map. An interesting character. He lived in Greensburg. He married a local girl, Sidney Coons, from the Coons family down in Dutchtown, who had the tannery. He had a horse named Somerset, which seemed to be something he was proud of. In 1804, he was admitted to the bar of Westmoreland County, and he died in 1840. I'd like to say a lot of things about him, but we have to move on. 1825, there was a Greensburg paper across from the courthouse called the Greensburg Gazette, and they published an article that had this picture in it, and this article prematurely, pompously pronounced that Greensburg would never, ever have a railroad because it was simply too hilly. And we should probably look at the pronouncements of contemporary pundits in that light, people who are often talking about things they don't know anything about. By 1852, there was actually a photographer, and a daguerreotypist had shown up in town. He didn't live here. It was Frank Hook. He lived in Philadelphia, and now and then he would go out on the road and rent space and take photos. He was renting space from Andrew Gamble, who was on Main Street and was a stone carver, stone sculptor, as he called himself. He did tombstones that we still have to recall him. Also, there were a few people doing portraits. This fellow, Osborne, was from Pittsburgh. Also, he did not live here. When he showed up, he would live at Rohrer's Hotel, this was 1813, and paint local people. Now, here's a fellow who was also a painter. His name was Letton, and he actually lived in town, not long, but he painted portraits, did sign painting, and these activities actually wouldn't support him. He had to do something else to keep life and limb together. You see, Mr. Letton was actually trained as a blacksmith. He had a scythe manufactory in town, not just a blacksmith shop, but a manufactory. A person who made scythes was an edge tool maker. Here's another edge tool maker in 1814, Ellsworth. And he had his place office opposite the printing office of William Graham, which would place him on Pittsburgh Street, which we will take a look at. Old Pittsburgh Street was not a pretty place if you read the accounts. But this is somewhere around and a bit after 1800. This is Pittsburgh Street going up the hill. This is what we now know as Maple Avenue, but it was then called Front Street. And it was called Pittsburgh Street because that was the way to Pittsburgh. And it was the main street for a while. I mentioned this as Allwine Street, but it did not exist at this point. Allwine Street came out, or Avenue existed later. Down here was a place where a blacksmith had his establishment, a tailor. 1818, two fellows put together a brewery here. It was Eli Calder and a fellow named Reed. And they were making beer here and selling it. Reed and Calder eventually fell out and went into suing one another. Now, up here was another place where Samuel Allwine eventually had his blacksmith shop. So we understand now why Allwine Avenue has its name. The house that sits right here below Allwine Avenue was once the Allwine house. And up here, we're pointing to the alley that's behind the YMCA. This whole block, this whole plot here was called one time the plot of the public spring. There was a spring here, which made it a very good place to build a brewery and a distillery. The McCaskey brothers in around 1800 built a stone building which they rented out as a brewery and a distillery. They were stonemasons. And water from the public spring flowed right into this place where you needed a lot of water. On this corner was also another watering place, metaphorically. This was a place that was called the Federal Springs Tavern. The Federalists, the local politicians, used to hang out here, and all those of the Federalist persuasion drank here and had their meetings here. Before 1800, Bartle Laufer ran the place, and he was once a county commissioner. Around 1800, a fellow named Mecklin, which was the earlier form of Meckling, bought the place, and he ran it as a tavern and also did carding here. Often they had to do two things to stay in business. Right above the intersection here was a blacksmith shop, another one. A guy named Beck, B-E-C-K, ran the place. And the Becks also made gunpowder. And I see we're at a point where we should say so long until next time. So we'll shut this down.